No matter the pull toward brink, no matter the florid, deep sleep awaits, there is a time for everything. Look, just this morning a vulture nodded his red, grizzled head at me, and I looked at him, admiring the sickle of his beak. Then the wind kicked up, and after arranging that good suit of feathers, he up and took off. Just like that. And to boot, there are on this planet alone something like 2 million naturally occurring sweet things, some with names so generous as to kick the steel from my knees. Agave, persimmon, stickball, the purple okra I bought for $2 at the market. Think of that. The long night, the skeleton in the mirror, the man behind me on the bus taking notes. Yeah. But look, my niece is running through a field calling my name. My neighbor sings like an angel, and at the end of my block is a basketball court. I remember. My color is green. I'm spring. Let's just take a comfortable seat. We'll come back to the poem about midway through. Feet flat, feeling the soles of your feet on the floor. Lengthening the back a little bit and the neck. Softening the shoulders. And letting the hands just fall face up on your lap, if that's comfortable. Relaxing the muscles of the face. The forehead. Focusing your inner attention on the space just between and above your brow, between your eyes and above your brow. 'Letting the breath deepen now. 3 counts in. 4 counts out. 'Just taking whatever you're holding this morning into the forge of the heart. And as you breathe out, releasing it. That accounts for the extra second. 3 counts in. 4 counts out. And now a little bit deeper into the forge. 4 counts in. And 5 counts out. For those of you who woke up to snow this morning in Washington and Maryland, you might remember the little child in you who responds to the quietness of the street. Maybe the sound of shovels outside. Just to luxuriously notice what's here. Now we're in it. With that extra second of an exhale each time, just release whatever it is you're holding. Open up your defenses. Let it pass through. You might just say, how interesting. Sorrow is not my name. No matter the pull toward brink, no matter the florid, deep sleep awaits, there's a time for everything. Look, just this morning a vulture nodded his head, his red, grizzled head at me, and I looked at him admiring the sickle of his beak. Then the wind kicked up, and after arranging that good suit of feathers, he up and took off, just like that. And to boot, there are on this planet alone something like 2 million naturally occurring sweet things. Some with names so generous as to kick the steel from my knees. Agave, persimmon, stickball, the purple okra I bought for $2 at the market. Think of that. The long night, the skeleton in the mirror, the man behind me on the bus taking notes. Yeah, but look. My niece is running through a field calling my name. My neighbor sings like an angel And at the end of my block is a basketball court. I remember. My color is green. I'm spring. We began our conversation with the note I sent you and the poem from Kabir. As I said, it's the subject of devoted noticing. Kabir was a poet and a devotee of the bhakti path, a Hindu tradition. And essentially it came down to seeing God or the bud of God in everything that you behold. And then at the end of that poem, he talks about God being right there at your shoulder. And this poem seems to be the perfect contemporary response to Kabir. And you can find everything that you need in it here in the Volta. But look, my niece is running through a field calling my name. My neighbor sings like an angel, and at the end of my block is a basketball court. I remember. It starts with but look, and it comes to fulfillment with this I remember. And in Pali, the word for remembering is sati, and what we're remembering is that we're here. We're not in a place of should be, or ought to be, or should not be, but a place that just acknowledges what's here, what's around us. It's what Mary Oliver says when she says, my place, finding my place in the family of things. And he associates that with the color green and spring. And I'll talk about that in a second. The question of devotion came up in a conversation that I had last week with a friend of mine. And we were joking in part. She had come up with this idea that devotion was to devote, to set down your preference and offer the power to that higher part of you. And in a way, it's true that devotion means to set down a vow. It comes from the Latin, to set down a vow. And in this poem, the vow seems to be that what I'm going to look at is what will expand. Sorrow is not my name. And so he acknowledges all of these aspects of the landscape which could incite fear or craving, and instead chooses to look at the basketball court and the niece and the positive aspects of this landscape. And he's sort of setting aside all of those doubts that the poem begins with in order to embrace the realities of Buddha nature in everything. And when you first read this poem, you might think, is this just a Pollyanna, optimistic, Panglossian view of the world? But it's not. It acknowledges the brink at the beginning. It acknowledges the vulture. And the vulture is really interesting because it's usually a vilified creature in the arts and movies and, our depictions of it traditionally. But here, the vulture has a kind of impressive quality. You know what I mean? It's got this beautiful suit of feathers, and then it comes and it just takes off. So I love how he recognizes, and he does this in all of his poems, Ross. He recognizes the mud out of which this final lotus, this I remember, is going to emerge. So imagine the whole poem is just mud, caked upon mud, caked upon mud. And without that mud, this enormous flower at the end of recognition wouldn't be possible. So when he says no matter, I think he's really saying literally, it seems real, but it's not true, as Tara Brach often says. It's no matter because it seems real, but it's not true. This fear, this craving, this ignoring that we go through. So it's really a poem about seeing God in this tiniest house of time, seeing God right here at the next shoulder. And a little bit about Ross before we go back into it. He's a Black poet who writes about Eric Garner, who writes about microaggressions, who writes about scary moments being stopped by the police. So for him, especially these threats that he's naming in the landscape are very real and very urgent. But if you look at the titles of his books and some of his other poems, you'll see that there's always this willingness to be open to the awakening. He has titles like Beholding, or like this one, Sorrow is Not My Name. And I couldn't go on without mentioning the formal messiness of this poem. It's got language like yeah, and the line breaks are not very logical. They're much more intuitive, and they have to do with pauses in the breath. So there's something very natural too and spring-like the messiness of spring emerging from underneath the snow that you find in the prosody of this work. And I think he's just saying that there's no need to ennoble it. There's no need to heighten it. Everything that we need to see and to remember is right here, whether it's the basketball court or my niece running toward me in a field. So let's go back into it. I'll read it once more at the end of the meditation. As you take your seat again, feet flat, palms facing upward on your lap. Relaxing the shoulders. Maybe just placing your hand on your heart, if that feels comfortable. And I just want to ask, is there an opportunity here to say, yeah, or no matter? To something that you're taking too seriously. It doesn't have to be a major life crisis, but maybe something at work, maybe a small argument that's bothering you, maybe a little inconsiderate action that stayed with you. And can you just take your hand off your heart? And as you take your hand away from your heart, to just pull it out of you and say, how interesting. And if you need to, just do it more than once. As you take your hand away from your heart, to pull it out of you and say, how interesting. And then deepen the breathing again to 4 counts in, 5 counts out, and just clear away whatever residue is left. And with whatever spaciousness you're feeling, take in these words from Thich Nhat Hanh, which are his version of what Ross is talking about. If we look deeply at the bud of a tree, we'll see its nature. It's very small, but it's also like the earth, because the leaf in the bud will become part of the earth. If we see the truth of one thing in the cosmos, we see the nature of the cosmos. We look deeply at the bud of a tree, we'll see its nature. It's very small, but it's also like the earth, because the leaf in the bud will become part of the earth. If we see the truth of one thing in the cosmos, we see the nature of the cosmos. That's Thich Nhat Hanh talking about the fifth miracle of mindfulness, which is deep looking. The last moments here, fix your attention right here, just above the brow and between the eyes, your inner attention on that thing you love, because you can see the Buddha nature in it. Could be the plant that you've had on your windowsill for 2 years, 5 years, or it could be a puppy, a beloved pet, a child. There's a Carolina wren that lives in my backyard, and to me it's the most beautiful sound. Oh, it's what we learn is when we start to describe the world, what we're really describing is not some absolute truth out there, but how we see the world. We're writing a self-portrait no matter what we're putting down on the page. We're telling on ourselves. We're showing what we notice. Sorrow is not my name. No matter the pull toward brink, no matter the florid, deep sleep awaits, there is a time for everything. Look, just this morning, a vulture nodded his red, grizzled head at me, and I looked at him, admiring the sickle of his beak. Then the wind kicked up, and after arranging that good suit of feathers, he up and took off, just like that. And to boot, there are on this planet alone something like 2 million naturally occurring sweet things. Some with names so generous as to kick the steel from my knees: agave, persimmon, stickball, the purple okra I bought for $2 at the market. Think of that. The long night, the skeleton in the mirror, the man behind me on the bus taking notes. Yeah. But look, my niece is running through a field calling my name. My neighbor sings like an angel. And at the end of my block is a basketball court. I remember. My color is green. I'm spring. Thank you all. Wonderful to see your faces. I'll be back next week, and I'll send out a newsletter with a little review of everything we talked about today. Thank you so much.
Thank you, David. Thank you.
Thank you, David.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, David.
Thank you, David.
See you.
Thank you, darling David.
I missed you.
Love you.
I love you too. Great. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good to meet you.
Good to meet you too. Welcome everybody who's new.